Okay, hold that family. My name is Brother Ray. Welcome to the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club.
Thank you.
We meet here every other Wednesday in honor of William Mackey Jr., Louis Ray Rivera, Amos Wilson, Brother Hassan, who just made his transition, Brother Sekou, El Haj Malik El Shabazz, Minister Khalid, Professor Mackey, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Gil Noble, and all the historians, Professor George Simmons, people that gave up fame and fortune. They could have made a lot of money. But they chose history in the long nights of studying when it wasn't even a computer in sight. Miss Leola Maddox, Big Harold, and Miss Leola had an old car, a Toyota, that rides forever. And she used to come from Teaneck all the way to the UAM because she believed in bringing people together.
Amen.
In live lectures.
That's right.
So we never want to forget.
Yeah.
So for the people that came out in honor of Black History Month and our program and support, give yourself a big hand. We appreciate you. Our Zoom audience, we want to thank you. We want to thank you for coming out. So I'm going to give a couple of, we're going to bring the camera over here to the Amos collection, Brother Mike. We sell these books to help survival in honor of African World Info Systems to continue the great work of Amos Wilson. We have Blueprint for Black Power, The Psychology of Self-Hatred toward the Reclamation of the African Mind, Black on Black Violence, Issues of Manhood in Black and White, African-Centered Consciousness versus the New World Order, The Falsification of African Consciousness, Brother Earl Ponder, who left us too soon. He wrote Revealing the Unspeakable Bible Verses.
A very good book.
And he left us too soon, as the Bible had some books left over, so we want to keep his name alive. The Developmental Psychology of the Black Child, and S.K. Damiana, Distorted Truths, the Bastardization of African Cosmology. Those books help Brother Sababu in African World Info System continue the great work of Amos Wilson. Now I have some other books that I picked up. The Lost Jews, The Last of the Ethiopian Philosophers.
Good piece. Oh, good.
We have in honor of Dr. Randy Short, The Impact of Religious Slavery Revealed. And Dr. Randy Short, Harvard documentation and
PhD from Harvard, yes.
PhD from Harvard. And he sacrificed because he doesn't have income coming in. Cynthia McKinney, When China Sneezes, from the coronavirus lockdown to the global political economic crisis.
Whoa.
You hear a lot of things that's going on in Georgia, where all these folks claim they care about the people. In my personal opinion, the only one that cared about the people in the state of Georgia was Cynthia McKinney. And she sacrificed her seat.
That's right, that's right.
The invention of the white race, Theodore Allen. In honor of Brother Harold, who left us too soon. I didn't know nothing about this book.
No?
And he mentioned the transfer agreement.
Yeah, powerful.
The untold story of the secret pact between the Third Reich and Jewish Palestine.
Right.
Sister Carol Alexandre, The Unspoken Truth About Racial Divide. In honor of Charles Hamilton Houston.
That's right. The man.
And the struggle for civil rights.
That's right.
Groundwork.
The man.
A lot of people are capitalizing on the word civil rights.
That's right. That's the man.
And I heard it today at a court procedure. But they ain't pay no dues. So this is on Charles Hamilton Houston. The great Dr. Ben, black man of the Nile and his family. Not too many computers around when Dr. Ben did this book, so we have this in honor of Dr. Ben.
Hard work.
Dr. Scott Whitaker, he's out of Atlanta, he's out of Georgia. I met him on Darren's program, Medicine, the causes and solutions to diseases, malnutrition, and the medical sins that are killing the world. This book is excellent. The Irritated Genie, Ayo Kamadi. This is a very small read, and he just finished this book. Jays Are the Problem. World War II, COVID-19, and medical censorship. This is a small read, but the information on there is utmost of the...
Right and exact.
When you do the research. So in honor, you can get this book on War on the Horizon, his website. War on the Horizon.
European views. Yeah, because you say that.
No doubt, no doubt.
COVID-19, they should not get away with what they pulled off. There ain't nothing over. The truth about COVID-19, exposing the Great Reset, lockdown, vaccine passports, and the new norm. Dr. Joseph McCullough and Ronald Cummins. And one of the best books I was ever able to start reading, The Real Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the Global War on Democracy and Public Health, Robert Kennedy. This is an excellent book. And when you start reading it, you're really going to get pissed off. And I just picked this up. Causes unknown, the epidemic of sudden death in 2021 and 2022. Edward Downs, forwarded by Robert Kennedy, and the afterword by Galvin D. Becker. I just started reading that. So, we have these books. You can purchase them, you can do your reading, and you can get your information. Let that person in, just hit the top of the computer. No, right there, and let that person in on the top, where it says admit. We have these books because it's about information. Hit admit, trust right on the thing, yeah. We have these books about information, and you can purchase them and do the reading yourself. So what I'm going to do now, go into the top left hand, and you could just pull them to the side, and top left, that little button, yeah. Thank you, Trust.
You got it.
All right. I'm going to read some information of community events for our Zoom audience and people to get involved and get history and information. Tomorrow at 8 o'clock, Thorough Black Talk. Sister Keisha, Tad, Brother Ashe, and Brother Blacksmith. On YouTube and Facebook, they show come on at 8 o'clock. Very good program. Also, our Philadelphia family with Sister Empress Chi, Blog Talk Radio. Sister Empress Chi and the Million Women's March every Saturday at 10:30. The number is 1-319-527-6189. And when you log on and call that, you can get into the conversation. And Sister Empress Chi and the Million Women's March out of Philadelphia, she's doing an excellent job. And then sometime they roll on Saturday. Good program. Every Monday at 10 o'clock a.m., Ayo Kamati Live, WSYP 95.1 FM out of Birmingham, Alabama. Brother Anthony Muhammad, Sankofa Radio, comes on every Monday at 10 a.m. You log on to that program on Revolutionary Radio, and they have a call-in, and you can call in and get on with the conversation in Ayo Kamati's program, War on the Horizon. It's an excellent program. Our brother Darren Muhammad, State of the City, 1590, Tune-In Radio out of Baltimore. He comes on at 12 o'clock on TuneIn Radio, and he comes on Facebook Live. 12 o'clock on Saturday, and he comes on sometime Wednesday and Thursday. And on Instagram, under the title Darren Mohammed or Mohammed the Comic. 12 o'clock Saturday, but it's an excellent program. Also, every Tuesday at 7 p.m., Dr. Aline, Your Immunity Project, comes on at 7 p.m. and also Calfani Radio. So Dr. Aline has an excellent program. I'll put the information in the chat so you can tune into his program. Also, every Wednesday on WBAI, Dr. James McIntosh, and that program is from, Mike, 1:30 to 2 or 2 to 2:30?
2 to 2:30.
2 to 2:30, WBAI. The name of the program is called Minefield. That's the Simultap organization and Dr. James McIntosh. And from what I understand, Brother Mike Graves was on there, and that program was real good last Wednesday. That comes on Wednesday. Now, if you want any other information pertaining to the Simultap organization, you log on to Simultap, and it'll give you everything you need. Also, on Fridays at 8 o'clock, African Echoes and our Newark, New Jersey family with Brother Trust Graham, Brother Danny, and Brother True. They have a study group every Friday at 8 o'clock. And they're basically doing the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat toward a reclamation of the African mind. We will put the information in the chat. Also on Saturday, our brothers out of Asbury Park, Brother True and the crew out of Asbury Park, they also do a study group on Saturday, and they're studying the book by Chancellor Williams, The Destruction of Black Civilization. And Trust Graham is also the moderator of that program. Community Cop comes on every Tuesday at 5 o'clock on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. You can tune in the Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and Community Cop program comes on at 5 o'clock. That's one of the hottest shows on the East Coast. So, and you can view all the Community Cop past programs that they did for years and years on YouTube under Community Cop. Family, all the lectures from the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club is on YouTube under BK William Mackey Jr. So you can go into the past lectures. So ladies and gentlemen, the start of our kickoff of Black History Month. We always try to, and history is of the utmost, and it's there for the whole month of February to enlighten people and at least get their minds started on studying a little history and getting to know something about your culture and your history.
Amen.
This is one of the baddest brothers. He can tell you about the organization that he does, and we give him the whole month of February to bring his expertise.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He's a good friend, and when you think you know something, when you think you know something, family, you might have to jump back, smack yourself, because when you think you know something, you might not know. Ladies and gentlemen, give a great big hand for our keynote speaker from African Echoes organization out of Newark, New Jersey. Give a great big hand to Brother Trust Graham, and he will give you his topic at the start of the Black History Month program at the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr.'s History Club. Brother Trust
In true African tradition, it's impossible for me to start unless I get the proper assurance and permission from my elders to speak. Do I have the permission by the eldest person in the room to speak?
Yes.
Thank you. Tradition is always an important part of our community, and acknowledging our elders is an utmost importance. And in order to reflect on who we are, where we come from, and where we're going. So that's always an essential part of how we begin to unravel and unfold who we are and how we present ourselves to the community. Second, I want to say happy African History Month to everybody. You know, even though for some of us, a month ain't nowhere near what we do, but it just gives us a time for reflection. How many people think that that they gave us the shortest month? Y'all heard that one?
Yeah, I heard it.
Yeah.
What we accept, so.
Yeah. Well, it's not that. The issue is that the only person that believes that don't know the story of how we got African history. Because African history wasn't given to us, and we didn't legislate for it. You know, black people designated it themselves.
Amen.
So the reason we got February is not because it's the shortest month. It was designated because it literally had 2 birthdays of prominent individuals they wanted to highlight at the time. And those 2 prominent individuals were...
One white, one black.
That's correct. Frederick Douglass,
Amen.
who's supposed to be born on Valentine's Day, February 14th. And then you had Abraham Lincoln, as you know, February 12th.
So-called Great Liberator.
The Great Liberator, right? Or the term they really like to use is emancipator.
Yeah.
The Great Emancipator. And when we talk about the formal beginning of Black History Month, we're talking about Carter G. Woodson, the Omega Sapphire. We're talking about the women's sorority at Howard University, who were really the primary instigators to Carter G. Woodson to actually convene a week where they would acknowledge and highlight and underscore African American achievements. And as time went on, that did take root, but it wasn't until 1972, I think, that it was Gerald Ford was the
That's
individual who actually made African history officially a month. So that just gives you a little history in regard to African history. You can have at the tips of your fingers these days a lot of access to material on the internet, and that's why I'm here for the lecture, because everything you get on the internet ain't all that, you know. And the internet is a very, very useful tool, and very, very, how can I say, broad in its source as far as information is concerned. But I think, like most information that we get, we are very, how can I say, unequipped in order to deal with it in the proper context and really understand it for what it really has to offer. So, just to say a few words. I also want to thank the William Mackey lecture series that they have been involved with ever since, you know, Dr. Mackey was around himself, you know, and having the opportunity to sit at his feet is, you know, again, was one of the greatest things that you could experience, whether you sat at William Mackey's feet, or Dr. Van, or Dr. Clark, or Ivan Van Sertima, or Shashi McIntyre, and Jeannie Bain, or Sister Kefa, or, you know, with just so many beautiful people that laid the foundation for what we do now, that it's always important that we give them their particular honorable mention for the contributions that they have laid for us in order for us to do what we do. And I also want to thank African Echoes, the Know Thyself Study Group in Asbury, and the 5% Nation, those individuals that were involved in helping to put a lot of this material together in my own personal experience that was the foundation for the information and how I myself acquired information. The subject matter that we're going to be dealing with tonight is a prominent figure, a personality, a renowned statue that I decided that I would, present to you. I'm going to give you a summary of his life story because the story is quite extensive, but the role that he played in history sometimes is overshadowed by other more prominent figures that the mainstream community would have liked to highlight. And a lot of times in history, because Africans didn't get highlighted or underscored, it was because we didn't know they were Africans. We didn't realize, or we didn't know or have the background from who or what they were. So when you mention people that did of significant value, most of us resort to their blackness via their actual contribution of what they actually contributed to the world experience. And when we talk about these unsung heroes, we talk about them because a lot of people, missed over, who they were and what their contribution is. I'm gonna give you an example. I'm pretty sure many of y'all are familiar with the religious personality Jesus Christ, or Jesus the Christ. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of y'all are familiar with the story of Jesus the Christ and, some of the events and the turmoils that he went through. But there is a person, or there is an event that I'm pretty sure y'all are familiar with. And that event that y'all are familiar with about Jesus is Jesus being persecuted, not on the cross, but carrying it. Carrying it through the streets of Rome. Y'all heard about this story. And you heard that the cross becomes so overbearing and so burdensome that the struggle is so painful that somebody out of the crowd comes out of the crowd and picks up the cross for Jesus. Sure. And he carries that cross for the rest of the duration. Now, most people, most of the Christians, know of the person that carried the cross. In other words, they know that Jesus stumbled and this person came out and carried the cross. Does anybody know his name? Okay, that's good. Right. And his name is Simon. Simon. And the place that if you look it up in the Bible, his name is Simon from Cyrene. Simon from Cyrene. Cyrene they're talking about, Cycrene, is really not the full name of the place from which he comes from. The place is called Cyrenaica. And the place he's from is in modern day Tunisia, in Algeria, it's in Africa. And his name is Simon of Cyrene, and he was the individual who carried the cross for Jesus the Christ. Now, most people don't know him as Simon from Cyrene, the African, because that's not how the story is told. The story is told from the individual who's writing the story, and the benefit of the African is not in his favor. You know what I'm saying? And then second is that what would be the significance of titling that individual as an African if it conflicted with their way of thinking or their cultural perspective of who the personality was. But in this case, the issue, what I'm trying to show you, and that is that there's a lot of things in history like that involving black people. And the problem is that if you don't have good methodologies of research and study, you'll never pick up on that. You see? So what we do at African Echoes and at the William Mackey study groups is we try to provide a set of methodologies and procedures that help you in the process of consumption of information. So the issue about Black history is not that they're not teaching us Black history. As a matter of fact, they could teach you Black history all day long, and you still ain't gonna know shit. And the reason that is because it's not what they teaching you, it's how they teaching you. Now, Ray talked about a personality that William Mackey group works with, and that's Sababu Plata. Sababu Plata. He's the editor-in-chief of Afro Info Systems and was the right-hand man to Amos Wilson, which is what I call the great high priest of psychology. Let me say that again. I call him the high priest, the great high priest of psychology.
No doubt.
And as he indicated, we use his book, currently this book here, The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat, The Reclamation of the African Mind. We're using it currently now. Amos is that individual who covers crosses every T and dots every I. He's a person that goes beyond the surface. You know, a lot of us, when we talk about history, we surface people. We're talking about the run of the mill. But there are certain individuals of us who go beyond the surface. In matter of fact, in diving terms, we would call them deep divers. You know, they deep and they call them free divers. You ever heard of a free diver? A free diver is an individual who's different than a diver because a free diver dives with no tanks. He just used these two things here, they call his lungs. And he has developed these lungs to the point where that he can almost hold his breath for 5 to 7 minutes to 10 minutes at a time. Amazing. But Amos, like a lot of individuals, were deep divers. These individuals who really, you know, did not span the surface of what it meant to study and do research. And myself, I learned from people like Amos Wilson, Professor George Simmons, Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Yosef Van Yecken, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. These are all of the individuals I call my mentors, people that I use as my guideposts in, how we approach information. But we look at our organizations as organizations that deal with what I would call grassroots guerrilla fundamentals of research and study. That means that we're not looking based on the very nature of the academic institutions that you frequent on a regular basis. Which one, whatever that might be. But what we do try to provide you with is a basic fundamental process of how to study and consume information. And then when you have mastered that, you will be capable and ready to deal with information no matter what form it comes in. And you'll find that those techniques are applicable in not just that form, but in an across the board kind of process when you're dealing with research and study. And our highest and our most important aspect of this is not about just the research and study, but also the accuracy of the information. That means that we don't want no QAnon information. We want information that is credible. We want information that has evidence to support it or corroborate it. And then we want to be able to have cross-referencing material in order to validate its strength. You see what I'm saying? In other words, we just don't take it for granted because Dr. Van said it, or Dr. Clark said it. We don't take it for granted because Ivan Van Serve wrote it in the book. You know, it's because we followed it up with the proper research and validated the material and then brought it into our own, you know, level of understanding. And that's what we are dealing with. So, and I wanted to lay that out first before I started the lecture itself. And as again, it won't be much of a lecture as it is a discussion. And discussion of very prominent personality in, you know, African history. But one of the things that I always try to do is try to share with you material or individuals that I believe that you might not have the opportunity or have been shared with this particular kind of information. So I usually don't talk about the Martin Luther Kings and the Rosa Parks individuals. Do I know them? Of course I do. But because those are so often circulated and so leastly understood, that I thought that I would deal in another particular arena. Y'all notice what I said? I said so frequently circulated and so leastly understood. In other words, so leastly, how many people here really know who Martin Luther King is? You know, I don't think a lot of us really know who he is. I think we have this idea. It's the same thing about Jesus. We got this idea. None of us really, most of us never really read the story. We heard it, but we really never read the story. So in this case, this is what I'm talking about, the yearly, annual, you know, redundantly rotated personalities that they feel that are acceptable for circulation. And I'm talking about the mainstream society. Right. And that has nothing to do with, you know, white or black. It's the mainstream society. So don't get this impression that because the way something is circulated that the difference is based on black and white. That's not always the case. Because, you know, when we was young and we first got involved in a lot of the research, one of the things that when we came up and did some research on, you know, African institutions, one of the things we used to call Howard University was, and again, we was young, we used to call it white universities in blackface. That's what Howard University was. Now it's a little different now, but those of us that really know the history of these institutions knows what and how they developed and what was the underpinning, what the intent was, and then what the outcome was, you see. Anybody know who General Oliver O. Howard was? Beyond Mike?
Oh, okay.
Because Mike is our resident historian here in Brooklyn. So.
What's the name again?
General Oliver O. Howard. He's the name guy who they named Howard University after. He was a white man. He had a cut off arm because he was in the Civil War. And after the Civil War, they gave him a job of being president of what is called the Freedmen's Bureau. When you get time, you'll check it out. But the reason I'm saying this is because I just want you to understand that the inception of a lot of these institutions is not the institutions that you see today, but the outcome of what they were, what the inception of what the individuals put these institutions together for, and second, you know, what the eventual outcome was. So, you know, most of these institutions were not primarily, and Mike could tell you this, that the majority wasn't financed by black people. Let me say this again. They were not financed by black people.
Absolutely.
So usually, you ever heard this saying, he who pays the piper, what?
Calls the tune.
Calls the tune. Right. So if I'm paying your education, do you get to choose?
No.
Right. So why y'all all upset about Florida? Why y'all all upset? And the reason I'm saying about y'all paying, I'm not talking about just paying in taxes and, I'm talking about really paying in sacrifice. Have y'all ever noticed that the European Jewish community at no time ever challenged the federal government or a state government in regard to what they are teaching their kids? At no time. Never.
True.
And tell them why, Mike.
Because they're not going to allow anybody to tell them how to teach theirs. So
Right. And then second, the other part of it is what?
the other part of it is that they will allow you to teach and develop your own community because they're going to develop their community.
Right. In other words, to piggyback on what he's saying is they're not going to allow you to tell them what to teach, but they're not going to allow because they're going to teach their kids.
Right.
Right. So what I'm saying is that if you ain't teaching your kids, why do you think that the people that raped, robbed, and lynched you, the people that went all the way to Africa, kidnapped you, and enslaved you, and then you assume that that same person or that same group of individuals are going to educate you and give you power? It's the funniest thing in the world. I could never believe that. Anybody ever seen Games of Thrones? You ever seen that? Well, one thing if you ever notice about white boys and power, they don't give it away. It's not a giveaway.
Right.
It's not a sale. You either got to be bad enough to take it, or you're going to be a victim of it. One or the other. But that's how it works. So, again, this is why we have to be more realistic about what education means to us and its function. And I don't think we really understand what the function of education is. We don't have a clue. So, without ado, and this is just before I get to my subject matter, I want to go to my trusty go-to. See, this was, like I said, this is the man. And when it comes down to serious information, I always go to the man. Right now, we on a particular chapter in this book that deals with some of the issues that we are talking about. And we've been talking about them in the last couple of weeks. So I want to share some of this with you. And if you don't know, it's page 124, my dear, if you have a copy. And for those in the viewing audiences, I'm going to be reading from The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat Towards a Reclamation of the African Mind by Amos N. Wilson and edited by Sababu Plata. I'm going to be reading from page 124 where it says at the top of the page, function of education. The function of education. This is, again, Amos Wilson, and in matter of fact, for those who do have the book, if you get a chance, after we finish reading this material, and you get back home, I want you to go to page 120, just before this, where it says the power of definition, and you can read that too. I don't want to read it right now, because it's a little lengthy, and it might cut into some of the time that I use for my subject matter. But it's very, very important, the power of definition, because it defines not just words, but how reality is to you. What reality is. And in that definition, Amos provides for you the fundamental underpinnings for what education actually is and what it should be. You know what I'm saying? So if I asked you what education was for, what would you say? When you go to school, what do you think education is to do?
It should be to enlighten you and hopefully teach you how to analyze for yourself and to do constructive thinking to come to your own conclusions without being led by others or manipulated.
That's quite interesting. My dear, what do you think? Education, what do you think its function is?
Training.
She said training. That's quite easy, fundamental. What do you think? Education.
To become more wiser or more knowledgeable
Okay.
about just certain issues and situations.
Okay.
You know.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Willie, function of education. Now, Willie is one of the individuals who is a frequent, attender of our classes. So, Willie might have an inside tip.
Inside school.
That's right. Anybody?
Yeah, it's to
Yeah, go ahead.
it's to change your present condition into a better condition.
Your present condition to a better condition. You got the book in your hand, my dear. What would you think before even reading the material, the function of education? What did you, when you went to school, or you was sending your children to school?
They're supposed to learn.
They're supposed to learn. Okay. And my dear, what about you?
When I'm learning or attending your group, is to learn how to think.
Wow, I like her. That's right, to learn how to think. So let's ask the in-house comedian. The function? What do you think the function of education is? What is its function?
For me, it was to delay my comedic process so I could stay in my house free.
I like that. I like that. That's capitalism at its best.
My mom
What did he say? Please repeat.
Go ahead.
was to allow me to stay in my mother's house for free for 4 years while I work on my comedy.
Sir, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to miss you overstep.
To enlighten your mind, to bring you from a lower grade thinking to a higher grade thinking.
Okay. Now, one thing that I noticed that is a thread through what everybody said is most of y'all are looking at it personally. It's a personal thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read what Amos says and think about how Amos is thinking about this, and then think about how you think about it. It's not an issue of bad or good. It's not an issue of, right or wrong. This is just an issue about a different way of thinking or seeing something. So take it in context. Again, page 124. Let me get my glasses on.
Excuse me, I got here a little late. Which book are you reading from Amos?
The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat. The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat. Again, this book was originally published by the African World Info Systems. As you do know, that the author is Amos Wilson. It was originally done in 2019. And it's actually a series of lectures that Amos gave, and then Sababu literally transcribed all of these particular lectures. And they are phenomenally out of this world. But let me read definition. It says the function of education. And think about this, and while I'm reading this, think about the answer that you gave. One of the major problems with us as African Americans and African people is that we look upon education exclusively as a means of getting a job and gaining status. This is a ruinous, backward way of looking at education.
Absolutely.
The major function of education is to protect the interests of a people. To advance that people's interests, to maintain their power. That is the function of education. You produce educated people so that these objectives can be achieved. The educated person is a product of the need to protect one's interests. You don't educate first. You decide what kind of people are needed to protect your survival, and then you educate them in those terms. You don't educate them to get jobs per se. You don't educate them to join the great middle class and the great American mainstream. You educate them to protect yourself and to secure your survival. Every culture, no matter how primitive, educates its people and especially its young for the same purpose: to maintain its traditions, to maintain its social integrity, and to maintain itself as a people. When you deceive yourself in thinking that you're being educated for jobs and prestige, you're on your way out as a people. You're setting yourself up for destruction. You must measure the value of education in terms of the degree. You must measure the value of your education in terms of the degree to which it ensures your survival as a people. You must measure it in terms of how and what your children are taught, not in terms of what is taught at Harvard or Yale, or what the white children are learning, or what the Japanese or any other group of people are learning. You have to ask yourself, what is it that we must learn to survive and increase our advantage in the world? You designed the curriculum and educational approach based on that question. You don't look at others. You don't look at where you went to go as a people, where you want to go as a people. But when you have the ideology which too many of us have today, what we're going to school for jobs and for status, you are going to get only temporary relief, not a cure for your problem. This is why we cannot throw away our colleges and universities. This is why we need to create a truly, truly independent black college and university. Educational institutions in New York City and in the United States. There is none that I know of. Let me say that again. Let me read this correctly so y'all listen carefully to what Amos is saying. He says that, but when you have this ideology, which too many of us have today, that we're going to school for jobs and for status, you are going to get only temporary relief, not a cure for your problem. This is why we cannot throw away our colleges and universities. This is why we need to create truly an independent black college, university, or educational institutions in New York City and in the United States. There is none that I know of today. Let me say that again. He made this, it was done in 2019. The lectures came from the late 80s. So he made this statement in the 80s when every major black college that you know was already up and running. And he's telling you right now that they are not black colleges.
That's
right.
This is from one of the greatest psychologists in our community.
Any community.
That's right, and what Mike just indicated is that Amos is one of the greatest psychologists in any community, psychologists in any community, and he's right.
That's true.
But let me go on. It says that that this is why we need to create truly independent black colleges, university, educational institutions in New York City and the United States. Because there is none that I know of. When you let other people finance your institutions, your education, and so forth, you're going to educate you in their interest. As Paulo Freire says, it's a contradiction in terms that the oppressor is going to educate the oppressed to overthrow him. That's what I just told you. Anybody familiar with Paulo Freire? He should. Reg is gonna reveal who he is. Go ahead, Reg.
He wrote a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Right. And what does that mean? What is the word pedagogy?
Education, teaching.
Teachings, correct. And what Freire did was he wrote this book in the late 50s, early 60s. And he wrote it at a time where he was literally counterparts and colleagues to a great writer of that day by the name of Frantz Fanon. And those individuals literally went after the colonial bastions hook, line, and sinker and ripped them apart piece by piece intellectually and began to unravel all of this nonsense that they was feeding us as a community. So Paulo Freire was that individual who created a book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and it deals with that particular information. It says, as Paulo Freire says, it's a contradiction in terms that the oppressor is going to educate the oppressed to overthrow him. So let me ask y'all a question based on what Freire said and based on what Amos Wilson said. Why are y'all so upset about what these white people are teaching y'all? I mean, like, why are y'all so upset? Y'all act like they supposed to teach y'all the truth. Y'all act like they gonna give you power to, gonna give you information to empower you to overthrow them. When we gonna learn, Mike? When we gonna realize that ain't nobody that's in the position of power and got their foot on your neck gonna allow you to move freely?
That's right. That's right.
You running around. See, they know how to get after black people or any people who they got their foot on their neck. The best way, the best and the most easiest way that you always subdue the natives is you throw them the greatest thing that poor people don't have. What is that? It's the P word. And I ain't talking about that kind of P. It's the P word. No, you throw promises.
Oh, promise.
Promises.
That's the regular.
That's right. That's what they do. But does it work?
All the time.
Okay.
That's what the politicians do every day.
But that's what it is. That's what it is. Where you think they got it from? Where you think the politicians got promises from? Where you think they got it from? They got it from the other P guys. Who's the other P guys? That give you more promises than politicians do. Pastors, preachers. The P guys. They know how to, the P guys know how to do the P.
There's somebody else above them.
Well, we ain't gonna deal with the G guys. We ain't gonna deal with the G man. Leave them alone. Or the G women. That's right. But either way, let me go on so I can finish this. It says that you're kidding if you think white folks are going to educate you into equality with them. You'll have to be out of your mind. You wouldn't do it to another people. Why do you expect them to be so beneficent to educate you to become their equal?
That's right.
That's not the way it's set up. Does it mean you don't go and get educated? I'm not saying that people misread me when I talk this way, but you have to know what you are doing when you get educated. You must have your eyes open. You must have your plan. You have to get out of it. You have to get out of it what's necessary for you. Not let other people define it and determine it for you. I wanted you to deal with this Hermetic myth. Let me say that again. I want you to deal with this Hermetic myth, because it is such a potent one, so deeply ingrained through the Bible and the so-called religious institutions of black people.
Okay.
That's right.
Make the connection.
Psychology versus religion. Think about if you had a psychological aptitude when you read the Bible. Think about that. Could you imagine if you had a psychological aptitude when you read the Bible? So what that would do, Reg, if somebody said that the world was made in 6 days? What would you say? What would you say?
I don't know, but Jesus is Lord.
Psychiatric imbalance.
He said Jesus is Lord. Is that true?
Yes, it is.
Absolutely.
Is Jesus good?
All the time.
Who said that? I say Jesus ain't good all the time.
His wife is in the back. He tried to say that.
How many people think God is good? How many people read the Bible and the Bible say God is good? Can anybody find in the Bible where it says God is good?
You can't say, I don't think in the Bible it says that. Not that because I read the Bible through and through. But there's a lot of things in the Bible that God did that ain't good. So I'll just say it that way.
I love that.
Very true.
And you know what she did? She was intelligent enough to know one thing. Plus she didn't know the passage or the material. She knew one thing, that it has to have a balance somewhere.
Right.
She knows that.
And also your
So,
perception.
go ahead, my brother.
You're right, it doesn't say God is good.
Mm-mm. Listen, anybody got a Bible? Anybody here got a
Let me put
Bible?
it like this. Cookies are good. God is great.
Yeah, but you're making us. Yeah, but
Cookies
you.
are good. God
Yeah,
is
but
great.
yeah, but what if I said God is?
It went over your head, right?
Yeah, but I'm gonna give something that ain't gonna go over your head. Listen to this. God is great. That's what you said. God is great. But again, there's nowhere in the Bible it says that God is
So that's
great.
an understatement.
Right. Yeah, but again, you're making that statement because of your compassion for what your belief is. It has nothing to do with the reality of the facts that are in the book. And what's in the book, you would have to read. Now, if you really read it, then you would never say that God is good.
No.
Because, wait a minute, let me just say. The reason that you will not say that, because in Isaiah 45:7, it identifies that that's not what God said about himself. Now, if you open up 45:7, it will say this. It will say, I, the Lord, make light. I, the Lord, make darkness. I, the Lord, make good. I, the Lord, make evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. That's what the Bible says.
And so you're going to take the Bible because one particular person wrote, or a collective of people.
But again,
that's their
but this,
interpretation.
yeah, but the
That's
issue
all
is,
I'm saying.
the issue here is
That's their
who,
perception.
no, that's the issue of the perception of the writers of the book. Now, unless y'all know something, you read Aramaic, do you? You read Aramaic?
Somewhat.
You read Aramaic.
I know about
I
Aramaic.
didn't ask you that. Come on, man. Stop fuzzing the question. I asked you a question.
Okay.
Can you read Aramaic?
I cannot read it.
Okay,
no.
that's case closed. We don't want no ifs.
But I know what Aramaic is.
Yeah, but just because how can you say I know what it is and say I can read it? That's two different things. Completely.
I got you.
Right. What's the difference between Amharic and Amharic?
That I do not know.
Okay. Well, see, and this is what I'm saying. The first thing you know about intelligence and about information, the first thing you want to know is always never be afraid to say, I don't know.
That's right.
And never be afraid to say that I never heard that before.
Exactly.
Right. That don't make you, dumb or stupid. It just makes you an intelligent individual who want to find out. That's all it does. But when you do that, it tells the person that you're dealing with that this person knows a little something. At least enough not to say something when he know he don't have nothing to say. I'm talking about for, most individuals. So the reason I ask questions like that is because it's based on whether we heard something versus we actually read it. So all of us, we read the books, but most of us, when it comes down to a book like the Bible, we heard it. We didn't read it.
True.
That means that, did you know the Bible is the most sold book in the world? It is the most sold, but it's also the most least read book in the world. That's crazy. How could a book that be sold that much be least read? The second book most sold in the world, in any country, in any language, is the dictionary. And everybody reads the dictionary.
Exactly.
Even if you have decent, don't even understand. Because I would say, out of the people that I know, that I actually know, and the people that I come in contact with, there are at least, I would say, anywhere from 85 to 90% of people that never read a dictionary and don't know how to use it.
That's probably lead to the.
They know how to look up a word, sure. They go to the A's and anybody can do that. But I'm talking about actually using. Like I was telling Ray Ray earlier. He showed me a book on a new book that he had got. And the first thing I did was I went to the introduction to see who wrote the book and how the book was put together. And in it has a page on how to read the book. And what you need to do to read the book. Go ahead.
I understand that while he was in jail, he read the dictionary from cover to cover. That was Malcolm X.
That's correct. And that's an important, one of the most, listen, if you didn't find out anything about that movie, that was one of the greatest parts of that movie. Because what it did two things. It showed him that he could self-educate himself. That's first of all. And he already had the drive, and he knew that if he really, really wanted to be saturated with the things that he knew he wanted to say and how to express it, he knew words would be at the foundation of that.
That's right.
And what did he do? He didn't say, well, every time I come off a word that I don't know, I go get a dictionary. Well, I don't go get a dictionary. I don't research without a dictionary. No, any person that reads information and don't have a dictionary, a map, don't have any forms of references, you ain't gonna really understand what you read. You're gonna have an idea, but it's like I said to you about Simon's from Serene. If you don't know where Serenica was, you don't know who Simon is, you don't know what I'm talking about. It's just a story to you. You see?
And maybe that is the problem that led to the confusion around the Bible and God. Because
That's right. That's exactly what led to it.
One meaning may mean something to you, and another meaning may mean something to me. And not looking at the etymology of these words. Because sometimes it takes transition.
Well, it is. Yeah, but all words do. All words do. All words do. That's right. All words do and all information. And the object is that over time, the information that you think is fixed, it will change. That's just the way history is. See, we think of history as something fixed. Oh, it happened at so-and-so time back then, and that's it. No, first of all, you got this idea that the story is told about that event is all absolute truth. And that everything that information about that event has all been exhausted. No, there's nothing in the world that happened back then that has the truth, that has absolute truth to it. Nothing. Nothing. And that in any given time tomorrow, it will change. Any historian, any anthropologist, any archaeologist, any scientist knows this. Here's a good example. This is where that book you had, Ray, give me that book. Let me hold that book for a second. Where that book you had, the one you got by, what's his name? That book.
Over there?
Huh? Oh, you know the book you had, the one with what's his name? With John Kennedy Jr., the big one. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Now, see this book here? This is a good book. But let me show you. I read the forward and this is a quote. This is a quote. This is a quote from Einstein. Einstein says, "The measure of intelligence is the ability to change."
That's right there. There you go right there. Case in point.
True, fix, change. What he's telling you is that nothing stays the same. And that real truth is change.
Change is constant.
Listen to this. He also said this. He said that, listen to this. He said imagination is stronger than truth. Wow, that's cold. Imagination is stronger than truth. He also carried that imagination is stronger than fact.
It should be.
Why is imagination stronger than fact? Anybody? Why is imagination stronger than truth, Red? Why would somebody would say that?
Because truth is sort of connected to a belief system. And you can believe a lie that you think is true. An imagination can, wander off and just about go anywhere and decipher whether something's true or a lie.
Yeah, but go ahead. Give me your perspective.
Isn't that little cliche that if you believe it, you can conceive it, you can make it happen?
Well, that could be part of it, I guess.
I would say,
The power of the mind.
Power of the mind.
I said, as time is going, man, learn more. Like advanced technology. What you may think is one thing today may be another thing tomorrow because of people research and scientists. The science is always changing.
Go ahead, Mike. What you think?
Well, truth is very limiting because if you see it and it's right there in front of you, you see it. But if you're looking at something in front of you, there's a whole world outside of what you haven't seen. And that's where your imagination kicks in.
That's the best.
So, and it's more powerful, your imagination. You can imagine tomorrow you being president. And you can work towards that. You can imagine you're going to build the next ship that's going to take people to Mars.
Right.
I know where you're going. You're going with the fact that if you're
You can imagine yourself beating the hell out of the white man.
But is that imagination or is that visionary? Are you visioning something to happen?
You can actualize it.
Well, here's a good example. And even if what Reg is saying, I look at imagination as the potential of something. I look at, okay. I don't, look at the potential of something. I look at the truth as the final of that. That don't mean it's the end of it, but it's the final of the thinking. So, in other words, in the beginning there was the Word. That's what it says, right? Right. But that can't be true. Why does it can't be true?
You don't point to me.
That's who I'm pointing to. Why in the beginning it can't be the Word?
Had having your thought.
I like this. I knew I liked you for something. She said, because you had to have a thought before there was a word. You had to have a thought. But there's something before the thought. What's before the thought, Reg?
Vibration.
No.
I guess the energy that creates it.
Imagination. You got to imagine.
Who said that?
You got to imagine.
There it is. The imagination is what? The imagination is the potential of the thought. You got that. Before there's a thought, there's the potential of the thought. It's like saying that I'm going to make a cake, right? I'm going to make a cake. And I have all the ingredients together, right? Now, all of us know just because you got the ingredients together don't mean that's a cake.
It's true.
Right. Second is that just cause that you make the cake don't mean the end result is a cake.
Yeah.
Y'all know what I'm talking about here. Right. So the issue here is that the ancient Egyptians were very, very, how can I say, very visionary. And one of the things also, they was very deep thinkers.
Yes.
And one of the things they began to realize was that eventually, if they said what a lot of individuals were saying, that the answer, because remember, religion, spirituality was the science of its day.
Right.
And what religion was doing was trying to answer all of the unexplainables.
Right.
And the unexplainables was where we come from, how you got here, all this, right? And one of the things that they began to realize is that a lot of individuals, when they couldn't explain anything to a certain rational degree, they chalked it up to God. Because it was easy, it was safe, and, wasn't nobody gonna challenge that. You know what I'm saying? But the Egyptians said, wait a minute, something wrong with that. Because if God created everything, and God is responsible for everything, well, where the hell did God come from? That's the big one, ain't it? So the Egyptians said, we got to come up with an answer for that. And they did.
And they did.
That's right. They came up with a hell of an answer. And the answer was, for those that come to my class know that answer is called a particular state. It's not a state of a condition. A state of a condition requires existence and objectivity. That means it has to have objects in it. It has to have things in it. It has to have physical attributes that define it. That's what it is. You see what I'm saying? But what the Egyptians found out is that in order for that to exist, we created the potential of existence.
Okay.
In other words, we created that imagination, that potential of existence to exist before it existed. That's what it's called. And they call it Nun. N-U-N. Now it sounds like none, if you think about it. But it's not nothing. Let me explain. It's not nothing. Anybody knows the difference between nothing and zero? Anybody?
Zero represents infinity.
Zero, that's it.
$20. I take $20 out of your hand. I put $20, I take it out. What you got in your hand? Who said that? It's impossible. How could he have nothing in his hand? Nothing doesn't exist. How could he have nothing that don't exist?
Wow, that's the thought.
This is a numerical value. Y'all do know that.
Okay.
There is a lowest common denominator of a numerical value. What y'all call it? Zero. What do he have in his hand? No, he has $0. Don't get it twisted. That means something. Zero is something. Nuh-uh. If I take a zero and I put a number in front of it or I put it behind it, the value goes up or down. Is that correct?
It changes.
Oh!
It changes.
Oh!
But what this is,
Zero is just potential.
right. There you go, right.
I mean, you're skipping around. There's nothing exists, all right? Because he got nothing.
That's right.
Right?
Nothing Let me explain. Oh, hold on. Let's back it up. Let me explain it so you understand the significance of it. In science, just like in reality, sometimes we create vocabulary for things we do not understand.
Okay.
All day.
Let me give you an example of that understanding. There is something that we call infinite. Y'all ever heard that word before? Infinite, right? Can anybody name something that's infinite?
It's 5,
Who said that? Now, go ahead.
The universe.
The universe. He said that the universe is infinite. Now, both individuals are wrong. Why?
Because we're relating it to something, right?
No, the issue is, how do you measure infinity? If there is no measurement, and you haven't experienced it, does it exist?
Conceptually, it does.
That's the issue is. So what we are talking about here is using a term to conceptualize something that we haven't experienced.
So conceptualization exists, therefore nothing is a concept that exists.
No. The concepts exist, yes. Nobody would negate that. But the concept of what it's about, that is still debatable.
It's unproven.
That's right, it's unproven. So the issue here is, how do we see that? And the Egyptians were smart. They said, well, wait a minute. What that means is the potential of something is greater than something. Even though the potential of it, based on our perception, does not exist. So the Nun is called, they define the Nun as before there was time, before there was space, before there was life, before there was death, before there was God, there was Nun. Nun is defined as a state, not a state of condition, because whenever you use the state of condition, we're talking about things. We're talking about existence. We're talking about something that's anterior to that. So like he said, infinite would be defined as the universe. Well, I say it can, because the infinite, based on the universe, is supposed to be a living thing. And that the universe is expanding.
Always expanding.
Right, but how can it expand if it's not expanding in something that is bigger than it? Can that happen?
No.
Can the universe, if the universe is a bottle, and I'm blowing up the balloon, inside that bottle, the balloon will take the shape of the bottle and it won't get any bigger than that bottle. Right?
True.
If the universe is expanding, that means that it has the ability to get bigger. If it can get bigger, that means whatever is inside it is bigger than it. It would have to be. The second issue is, are we looking at the universe based on boundaries? Are there boundaries? A guy asked me, he said, well, what is the universe? I said, man, that's light action. He said, well, what is the universe? Easy. It's a gigantic box with no top, no bottom, and no sides.
There you go.
So,
He like that. He know he like that. He gonna use that in his next act.
So check it out, so you saying
Just
also
come
that
here.
it sounds like
there's,
some women.
so therefore you're saying there's some neutrality, some neutral.
Yeah, it's supposed to be, but
It's
again, the
neutral,
issue is
there's no positive, there's no negative.
yeah. But my major concern about the exercise we just went through, is just to get you to think. That's all I want you to do. That's all I'm trying to get you to do. To go outside the box. That's all I want you to do.
What's the difference between thinking and imagining?
Huh?
What's the difference between thinking and imagining? Isn't imagining part of a thought process?
Well, it depends on how you define what your thinking is.
See, I'm not going there.
So you're saying that Nun was before God? Is that what
Nun, that's correct. Out of Nun came God.
So you're saying that the concept of God is something that people created themselves?
Of course.
Yeah,
All day.
Of course.
all day, every
I don't
day.
lie.
Okay.
Well, again, it's you don't
We
have
ain't
to.
selling it.
Yeah, that's there again. this, and I want to go to my subject matter. 'Cause we ain't got but so much time, and I want to really cover this issue. The subject matter that we came here to deal with this evening is a subject matter about a personality in history that I feel is a very unsung hero, but most of all, he gets overshadowed by another personality in his own family. You know, it's really funny because the individual who he gets overshadowed by, he became famous. This guy became famous because of him. In other words, the guy who most people know about in this story is a guy that is telling stories and became famous because he's telling stories about the other guy. That's real deep.
About his dad?
About his dad, right. The only problem is most of us never knew who the person was, and they definitely never knew his dad. So in this case, as y'all do know, I pawn myself off as an educator, as a individual who shares information. But I also look at the very nature of the process of how these things are done. So I always try to make sure that I have reference material for you. I have material that you can resort to for resources on the subject matter. But most of all, I always try to get you to think outside the box. Let me just read a little bit about the individual, and then I'm going to give you a brief summary. I'm going to read you some text, and then we're going to discuss the subject matter. Because the guy is so magnificent in the things that he has accomplished and what he has done. But it's so sad because very few of us really know who he was and what his accomplishment was. Here was an individual who was a general, who was the highest ranking black general in the Western world over white cavalries and officers. He was the highest ranking individual. Not in his country, but in all of frickin' Europe. Let me tell you this. The only guy after him who had any rank that reached that level was Colin Powell, as he said. That was the second guy. So you could imagine, when he reached that, it was the mid-18th century. 1750. No. Now, there's a difference, and the reason I'm saying no is because y'all are thinking one way versus another. And that's why I'm telling the story the way I'm telling it, because a lot of us think in one way. There were three individuals who had somewhat a similar name. The only problem was that they were different individuals who did different things, but became very renowned for their accomplishments. Where that, in this case, the personality in which I'm talking about is the guy who started the ball rolling. It's the father. Right. Then you have the son, and then you have, I was going to say the grandson, but it's not even the grandson, it's his brother. Right. And when we finish the material, you have a homework project. Because y'all know I ain't coming here unless I'm going to give you some homework. So that's what it is. Now, somebody want to say something?
She was just battling.
Okay. Now, go ahead.
I'm thinking of World's Great Men of Color.
That's correct.
And the three Dumases that I read about, is it not the grandfather, father, son? One wrote the
Go ahead.
Monte Cristo, the Three Musketeers.
That's correct.
One, know, but it was 3 different areas. But you're saying one is a brother, not
That's correct.
grandfather. All right, thank you.
Right. And the second is that the individual who is given credit for certain things, again, later on down the road, and this is what I'm saying again, when I share information with you, a lot of it is what I call wetting the whistle of the individual, so that I can spark you to go out and do further investigation on the subject matter. You understand? So that way you can become more efficient. Again, the personality who we're going to be discussing tonight is Thomas Alexander Dumas. Thomas Alexander Dumas. Not Alexander Dumas, not Sector Alexander Pierre. But we talking about Alexander, Thomas Alexander Dumas. And they don't really say his name like that. Really, he is defined as Alex Dumas. The son is called Alexander. But he never used the name Thomas, he only used the name Alex. But he was one of the baddest jokers in the neighborhood. And believe this. One of the stories that were told was at 4 years old, he was told the stories of his dad, even though he never knew his dad personally. That means that he didn't have that kind of relationship to really understand it. He knew, he related to his father, but his father most of the time was always going away in military campaigns or, working for the government, so forth and so on. But what had happened was in 1804, after his father died, what had happened was his mother comes home. No, he was.
Who are you talking about?
I'm talking about Alexander, Thomas Alexander Dumas. He's 4 years old. No, this is the father. The father, the father, Thomas Alexander Dumas, is 4 years old. His father is a white aristocrat.
Right.
A white aristocrat, originally from France. And his mother was a slave hand. Now, what happens is that, mind you, the father and his brother, they leave France and they come to the colonies because they're trying to make loot, in these new colonies. Now remember, the area in which this is taking place is a place called Saint-Domingue. Now, at that time, as you know, modern-day Haiti was originally colonized by the Spanish. It was called Hispaniola.
Right.
And then when the French came in, they fought over the situation, and France got half of the situation, and the Spanish got the other half. So the side that the Spanish got, they called it Santo Domingo. Santo Domingo. No. Yeah, we talk about Haiti, but we talking about half side of it.
That's the other side.
The side that you're talking about was called Saint-Domingue. Saint-Domingue, which is French, versus Santo Domingo is Spanish. Right. Saint-Domingue was taken because of its French colonizations, but the original indigenous name of the area was called Haiti. A-Y-T-I. Haiti. Not Haiti, but Haiti. Right. And say that again?
What does that mean?
If I'm not sure, but if I remember correctly, I think it means new land, but I could be wrong. But anyway, in this case, that particular area, Saint-Domingue, the French carried that area, and it became the most profitable area in all of the colonies in the Caribbean. It was powerfully beneficial. That's what they call it, the jewels of the crown. That's what they called it. And it made so much money that the British wanted to buy some of it from France. And France was like, y'all been smoking too much. Y'all ain't getting none of this. Ain't gonna ever happen. Because see, remember, the largest sugar plantation in the world was where?
United States?
It was not. No.
Barbados.
Y'all have been thinking.
He just told you, right? Santo Domingo.
No.
Haiti.
Hey,
No. Y'all not thinking.
Don't say it.
Let me ask y'all a question.
What was it, Sean?
What were the first places when Africans were brought to the New World? What's the first place they came to?
Charleston, South Carolina?
No. I said to the New World. What's the New World? And what is America? What is America?
This,
No, it is. So where does it go?
2 continents.
Nuh-uh, 3.
It's three.
What's the third one?
Well, not 3 parts of a continent.
Oh, okay.
North, Central, and South.
Right.
Right. So I'm asking you, when Africans first left Africa and they started the trade, where did Africans come first? And they didn't come to the United States.
Brazil.
Who said that?
Brazil.
They went to Brazil. Why did they go to Brazil?
Very fertile land.
Say that again?
Very fertile land.
Closer.
No.
The soil.
Who said that, Ajamu?
It was closer.
They was closest. That's right.
Close as that.
It was right.
That's right. All you got to do is go look at the map. They're right across the street.
Right.
When you look at America, they got to go up and over. So they did what Ivan Van Sertima told you, and they came before Columbus. If you take a stick and throw it in the river from the West Africa, the current is going to take it all the way to Central America. Just the current alone. You don't need no sail, nothing.
Right.
That's how deep the water currents are in regard to those particular areas. But the significance of that represents of, one, Africans coming to America, and then those Brazilians, was where a lot of us got first enslaved Africans and then transported to the New World, which was Central America and then the mainland. Y'all know how many Africans actually came to America, to this land? Do you know, out of all of the Africans that were kidnapped and enslaved, how many of them do you think actually came to the United States of America?
200,000.
How many?
200,000.
No, percentage-wise. 100%, 50%, 75%?
20%.
How much?
25%?
It was low.
40%.
About 3%.
3%? Close though. How about 10%? 10%. 10%. Think about that. 10%. See, and this is why I say we be talking about slavery and we don't know what we be talking about. That's our problem. And the issue is that was slavery big in the Americas? Of course it was. But how it got big is very different. The major amount of slaves that eventually developed in here, we bred them. That's how they got them. We bred them. Why? Because by then, 1804, what they do? They outlawed slavery on the high seas.
Right.
So you couldn't do that. So this is why it caused so much problem in Saint Domingue and in, Santo Domingo, in those areas. Because remember, the major concern for Europeans was resources. And to put some spices and some taste on that damn awful food they was eating up there. They had some of the nastiest stuff you could even imagine.
Yeah.
That's right. And if it wasn't for Africans and culinary skills, they wouldn't know doodly squat. But be it as it may, that's the area in which, where Thomas Alexandre Dumas actually was born. But one of the things about that, because his father was an aristocrat and the mother was a slave plantation individual, he decided that he was going to marry her. Well, I didn't say marry, he actually had kids by her. And what happened is that while he was in exile in Saint Domingue because they was after his ass in France. But what had happened was his father had died and he had this great inheritance. And they told him, look, you come, you get your shit, you know, so forth and so on. So the first thing he did was he wanted to go back to France, but he was so dead broke he didn't have no money. So what he did was that wife and the kids that he had as an offspring to that woman, he sold them. And Thomas, the son, he actually wanted to keep him, but he didn't. But he needed the money. So what he did with Alex was he decided that he would pawn him.
Pawn them.
Right. And he pawned him for a certain amount of time, and a couple of years later, the father came back and got him and took him after he had inherited the money. He took him to France, and while he was in France, he literally lived the life of an aristocrat. This is a black guy who was really black. He wasn't like
educated.
Yeah. Well, he educated him and he taught him all of the skills of an aristocrat. But one of the skills that he literally excelled at, and that was sword fighting. As a matter of fact, he became one of the greatest swordsmen in all of France. There was only one guy that could whoop his ass up and down the damn, streets of France. And his name was Chevalier de Saint-Georges.
That's the dude they made that movie about.
Well, he was a black guy who taught all of the swordsmen in all of France. He was the baddest swordsman, even badder than Thomas. And Thomas gained his claim to fame because of the battles in which he fought. That's what he was known for. But John St. George was so bad, he created a military group, only of black swordsmen. That shit, listen, them white jokers was upset.
It's racist.
But they ain't lose no battles. They was bad as the time of day they was bad. Right. But after a while, they become so effective, the incoming general decided that they would dismantle them. Because one of the things he found out was that this new individual who was coming up the ranks, he was causing problems in the neighborhood. And that was Thomas Alexander. What had happened was Thomas Alexander hated his white father because he began to abuse him. Even though he gave him access to aristocracy, the father was most of the time drunk, didn't take care of business, so forth and so on. And he'd leave, Alexander to himself. So Alexander got to the point where that he was tired of all this and he decided that he was going to leave. And his only way of leaving was to gain independence, and the way that he did it was through joining the military. The only problem was he decided that he didn't want to join the military under the auspices of his father. Because his father was an aristocrat of aristocracy, anybody of aristocracy, if you joined the army, you would join it as an officer. And he said he wouldn't join the army as an officer because he wanted to be a private. He wanted to go from the bottom of the ranks all the way to the top. And his father said, what are you talking about? You have the privilege to be one of the officers and you want to take a private? He said, well, if you going to do that, you ain't going to sully my name doing it. You ain't going to dirty none of this. So what you need to do is when you sign up for that private position, you don't use my name. So he used his mother's name, Dumas. D-A-M-A-S. The S is silent. Dumas. Alex Dumas. And he took the position. And he was so sharp. He was such a shining star in the military that he moved up the ranks so fast. In this one battle, he was so serious, he went to this one particular general, and the general told him what to do and how to do it. He went out and did it. And then when he came back to the general's house, he found out that the general had a daughter. High, skin, light, white girl. And he take a liking to that. And I guess y'all know what happened after all of that. And she ended up becoming his wife, Marie Louise. Dumas. And she was his main to claim supporter in every area you can imagine that Dumas literally accomplished. And as he went up the ranks, he was knocking over jokers the way you couldn't even imagine. And one of the guys that became aware of his accomplishments and his prowess on the battlefield, because he wasn't like he was a general, he was a real general. Here was a guy who was 6'3", imposing, black like midnight. They said that he had a muscular body like Atlas. And they said when he went to battles, he always rode in front of his battalions. That the first thing that the enemy would see would be him. And when they seen him, they would get frightened, because you never see a guy this big. But when they seen him start wielding the sword, everybody got out of his way. He was one of them kind of jokers. I mean, did not play. One of the key factors that went on is when this particular general began to notice the prowess of this individual, he began to realize this would be a guy that he would have to contend with for positions of authority in the military. Little did you know that guy who was watching him on the side, watching all of these accomplishments, putting him on the crosshairs of his eyesight, his name is Napoleon Bonaparte.
Interesting.
Napoleon Bonaparte.
The little guy.
The little guy. And one of the things that Bonaparte feared more than anything is to get into a battle with Alex, because he knew that he never at no time was battle hardened. You know, he never was a real battle fighter, never fought nobody.
Right.
You know.
Bruce Lee.
That's right. And what happened is that he began to realize that this individual, all of the major battles that from the beginning of the revolution in France to the end, Alex Thomas was involved. Damn near every one of them. He became to be so vicious in his attempt of subduing the enemy, they gave him a title, the Black Devil. That's the title they gave him.
Wow. That's a dope name.
Hey, bro.
I mean, for a movie. It's a dope name.
And when you think about his accomplishments, they are unparalleled in France, even today. See, we talking about an individual who surpassed what it calls the call of duty in regard to his responsibility to his country, to his community, and most of all to his race, even though they couldn't even bear the brunt of what it is. And all of the accomplishments that he made from the early days up until he began to bump heads with Napoleon Bonaparte, they literally accomplished civil rights issues pertaining to the black community. Don't you know, after his accomplishments, black and whites could marry. Black and whites could own property. Prior to that, black couldn't own no property. And all of this was put in legislation law until he ended up bumping heads with Napoleon Bonaparte. See, one thing I didn't realize, I was a historian in earlier days when I was at Head Start Books, and I used to study the history of ancient Egypt and Africa and all of that. But I was more involved in the black and the Africa part than I was about the issues and the substances of the events that went on.
Okay.
I was glorying in the blackness and had no idea what they really did. You get what I'm saying? And what that began to do is began to make me look at the information differently. So I began to take it apart and look at the things from a perspective of the individual who was going through the event versus the one who was telling the story. You see? So I began to realize that one of the greatest accomplishments of Napoleon Bonaparte was his invasion of Egypt. And when I read that material, all I was thinking about was the artifacts and all of the things that they saw and all of that. That's what I was thinking about.
Right.
I didn't look at the political aspect of it, the cultural aspect. All of this was part of it.
Right.
And when I found out that when Napoleon went, he didn't go just for fun and games. He went with a battalion of jokers.
Oh, they were all
Destroy.
disciplined in various sciences,
Right,
history.
right. But the issue was that wasn't their main claim to fame. That's the sidebar stuff. They took damn near 55,000 troops. 55,000 they took to Egypt from France. And think about this. They took 55,000 troops, and the joker who led every one of them was Thomas Alex Dumas.
Did they come on elephants?
Check this out. When the Egyptians seen the battalion coming across the sand, and they seen this horse with this big, huge black guy on this horse, leading these soldiers, they thought he was the man. They thought he was the Napoleon. And when they go up and they ask him, what's he said? Oh no, the little short guy right over there. And after a while, Tom began to realize that what the aims, goals, and objectives of Napoleon in regard to what was going on in Egypt, because as I said, it wasn't about just the artifacts. They was about doing what they do normally, take land. See, we think about, like, they ain't worried about that. That's a side issue. We want that shit, it's on. And that was their major concern. And Tom, Alex, and what's his name, Bonaparte, get into a beef about the whole thing. And he said, man, you wasting all our troops and all this shit you doing over here. You need to. And he was like, that's enough already. Because he was already scared of Thomas anyway. And his position was he was using an excuse to get rid of him. So he sent him home. And in the process of sending him home, they was already in a battle situation with the Austrians. And the Austrians capture him and throw his ass in jail. He's in jail, in solitary confinement, in a dungeon for almost 2.5 years.
That's the midget.
No, that's the...
That was Thomas Alexandre.
No, that's Thomas, right. In other words, this is the story...
That's how he died?
No, this is the story that his son, Alexandre Dumas, writes that becomes the Mount of... Right. The Count of Monte Cristo.
Right.
And it's about this particular event. That's the... Now, mind you, the story that he writes is a fictional story.
Exactly.
But the characters are real.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying?
That's not true.
Y'all know there's a movie just came out, same way. That the story, the characters are real, but the story is fictional. What's the name of the movie?
Woman King.
No.
Wakanda.
No.
Like that.
Wakanda, the characters are not real.
You said.
Eddie Murphy movie?
No.
You said that the
Black
characters are real.
How about
Black Adam?
The Harder They Fall?
Oh yeah,
Western. Oh yeah.
All the characters are historical characters. The storyline is fictional.
Right.
But all of the personalities are real. You see? So again, you can tell the story in a different way. But being as it may, that event of Thomas getting caught
How did he get caught?
He get caught in the process of him on his way back. They get and I think it's a boat issue, this, that, and the other, but be it as it may. I'm not gonna go into details because, like I said, homework.
Yes.
I want you to go.
So when you're trapped.
Two things I want you to. That's right. That's exactly what it is. What I want y'all to do. Two things is that I want you to get used to the process of research and study. Two, I want y'all to get comfortable with reading the material. That actually give time with reading the material, so that you can go to YouTube and see material. You can go to Google and you can see material, and then you can go get, a book and read the material. You know what I'm saying? And while he was in jail, he eventually, after 2.5 years, he's freed from jail. And when he gets out of jail, he finds out that all of the accomplishments that were achieved during his time of military service has now been rescinded. That all of the time that he was in jail, that the military never took care of his wife or his kids. And we talking about the greatest general. Not he was like some side joker. We talking about the baddest guy in the neighborhood. And he realized that this caused some really serious problems. So he went on another campaign, and then eventually he went home. And not too long after that, he died. And mind you, the story, and it's in this book, the story opens up as Alexander, after his father dies. This is Alexander Dumas, is saying that he finds out that his father is dead. He's 4 years old now. And he says this. He says, okay. And his father said, and the guy says he's died, he's not coming back. And he says, okay. So he goes, he's 4. He goes into his father's room. He's looking around. He finds his father's gun. He gets his gun and he holds the gun up. Big musket. He holds the gun up. And he takes the gun downstairs, and his mother sees him with the gun. He's like, where you going? He said, no, the guy had told him that his father was dead. He said, what do you mean he's dead? He said, well, he's home with, he's God now. He's with God. God took him home, like that. So he told him, after he got the gun, he went downstairs, and his mother looked at him and said, well, boy, where you going with the gun? He said, I'm going to see God. No, he said, I'm going to heaven. So the mother said, heaven? Going to heaven for what? He said, I'm going to kill God. God killed my father, and I'm going to kill him. That's what he said. That's how the book opened up. And I said to myself, wow, think of that. And mind you, through that time, from the time that event took place, all of his younger adolescent and adult life, his mother told him all of these stories about his father and all of the things that he did. And these things got so fixed in this young youth's head that he had no alternative but to tell the world what he had knew. And he created these stories, as you know, The Count of Monte Cristo, and The Three Musketeers, that became the swashbuckler movies for Hollywood for years to come. Earl Flynn, and what's the other one?
Zero.
Huh?
Not Zero.
No.
Zero.
No, you got Earl Flynn and the other guy.
The one who plays Zorro, yeah.
No, not him. Before that, the original Zorro. Back in the day.
Douglas Fairbanks.
Douglas Fairbanks, that's the one. Douglas Fairbanks and Earl Flynn. Them the ones that I knew. Where I was going on. Right. But the thing about that storyline is the significance of what and how the story was told. Now, the homework is, I want y'all to know who was the other writer in the family. There was another writer in the family. He wrote a major serious fictional play, and it became a major play, one of the most major plays. Y'all can find that out and check it out later. And I want y'all, the second part of the homework is I want you to do some research on Chevalier D. Davies, D. St. George. D. St. George. He was the swords master that taught Thomas how to sword fight. And he was the baddest of them all. He was the one who created this organization called the Magoons. That they was all black. And bro, they was bad as sliced bread. So that study, that project that you're going to do will really expand your base about, one, the subject, about that personality, but also about Tom Alexander Dumas. What I do want to do is I want to read a little bit of Tom Rees. Tom Rees is probably the contemporary foremost authority on Alex Dumas. And one of the reasons is because this book is relatively new and a lot of new material has been literally brought forth because of the resource material that he used to put it together was none other than Alexander Dumas' diary. Prior to that, that information was never available. So he says that the first 1/3 of the whole diary that Alexander Dumas wrote, and he's writing about himself. He writes about his father. The whole story is about his father. And it's just so powerful a story. And a lot of times when we talk about generals and leaders and people of renowned stature, a great deal of time they come from this side. You know, we don't get as many from that side. And when I mean that side, I'm talking about the European experience versus what we get here in the Americas. So most of our experience is told about that, and we think that ours is better than anybody else in the world, and don't realize that in Europe they was taking care of business. You know, the only difference is because we don't do a lot of research there and we're not familiar with them, we give this impression as if though shit, everything that was real serious was going on, we was doing it here. You know, and that's definitely not the case. So I want to read a little bit, and what I want y'all to do also, go to YouTube. There's a few different interviews and lectures that Tom Rees did, and there is a variety of stories and video footage of not just paintings and material of Thomas Dumas. They did erect one statue of Alexander Dumas. But check this out. It was erected in Germany. It was erected in Germany. And it was over, you'll see it in some of the, if you look on the Google and YouTube, you'll see the statue. And it is huge. I mean, it's life size. But one thing that's deep about it is that it stood only up until the Nazis came and destroyed it.
That's right.
The Nazis came and destroyed it. So let me go through this real quick and we're going to end. Let me see how we doing. We doing pretty good. It says, by the author of the international best-selling biography, The Orientalist, the Black Count brings to life one of history's great forgotten heroes, a man almost unknown today, yet with a personal story that is strikingly familiar. His swashbuckling exploits appear in The Three Musketeers, and his triumphs and trials inspired The Count of Monte Cristo. Both books written by his son, yet it is for one reason in particular that General Alex Dumas deserves to stand in history's spotlight. Alone among his race, he rose to command vast armies in an audacious campaign across Europe and the Middle East. And in his triumph and ultimate betrayal, we see how dangerous one individual can be to an entire an entire way of life. Born to a black slave mother and a fugitive white French nobleman in Saint-Domingue, present-day Haiti, Alex Dumas was sold into bondage but made his way to Paris, where he was schooled as a sword-fighting member of the French aristocracy. When the revolution broke out, he joined the army at the lowest rank, yet quickly rose through a series of legendary feats to command more than 50,000 troops. No matter how high he soared, Dumas continued to live by his blade and his boldness in the face of overwhelming odds. Yet because of his unwavering principles, he ultimately became a threat to Napoleon himself. Dumas was on his way home from conquering Egypt when his ship nearly sank and was captured by a mysterious enemy, thrown into a dungeon and subjected to slow poisoning, but the fate that awaited him when he escaped the dungeon would shock him even more. The Black Count is simultaneously a riveting adventure story, a slushly textured journey through the late 18th century, and a window into the modern world's first multiracial society. But it is also a heartbreaking story of the enduring bonds of love between a father and a son, drawing on Hirohito's unknown documents, letters, battlefield reports, and Alex Dumas's handwritten private or personal diary. The Black Count is a groundbreaking masterpiece of narrative notification. That's The Black Count by Tom Reese. I want to end now by saying this, and that is that sometimes history is in places you would never assume it to be. And one of the things that you find out about history is sometimes the best history comes to you from sources you never ever assumed they would come. So what I would like to do, I went down to Strand before I got here, picked up a few books that I thought that would be available, good books that I'm pretty sure that would fit within the same jurisdiction of the attack on the black community and family, and I came up with 3. Red Summer, The Black Count, King Leopold's Ghost, Adam Hochschild, and this here, out of all 3 books, this is one of the most powerful books that were ever written. One reason is that at the time it was being written, you know, I was in correspondence with Tony at the time about Hubert Harrison. And this book was written as a rebuttal to Mary Lefkowitz, who wrote an article called Not Out of Africa.
That's right.
Not Out of Africa. Mary Lefkowitz literally was a professor of classical studies, meaning Greek studies, in Wesleyan College, which was the same college that our dear brother, you know, Tony Martin, worked at. And at the time, Tony Martin had a course class on slavery. And the book that he was using was The Secret Relationships Between Blacks and Jews. And this particular book caused backlash from the administration and primarily from Mary Lefkowitz. And when she sat in on some of his classes, he started referring to some of these particular issues about ancient Egypt and Greece and all of that, and she wasn't having it. So she went after him, and she wrote that article, and they came after Tony like a bat out of hell.
Boy, did they?
Oh, but it was okay, because Tony had troops. And them troops was Dr. Bennett, Dr. Clark, Jay Carruthers. They all came out to woodwork. Bruh, listen.
Didn't she get her butt kicked against
Yes.
Clark Burnell?
That's right. What had happened was that event created such a stir in the community that WBAI decided that they would host a debate.
That's right.
And at the time, the debate moderator was Treats Lee. The individuals on one side, you had Martin Bonnell and Dr. Clark versus Mary Lefkowitz and Guy Rogers.
McLean Rogers.
McLean?
Guy McLean Rogers.
Oh, yeah, well. Anyway, the issue here is that Rogers was an Assyriologist. He dealt with Assyria and Mesopotamia and those areas, and Mary Lefkowitz only dealt with Greek material. Now, as you know, we call Dr. Clark not an ancient historian or modern historian. We call him a Renaissance historian because he's all over the place. And he's very focused in a lot of areas at the same time. And then Martin Bonnell, anybody know who Martin Bonnell really is? Do you know his pedigree in research and history?
It's Jewish history.
No. Yes, it is Jewish, but his area of study, his main claim to fame is he's a linguist. Right. But that's yeah, but that's not from where he didn't do that just by going to school. His grandfather is Alan Gardner. Alan Gardner is the individual who created the Egyptian dictionary. There's no Egyptologist, including Dr. Ben, including Richetti, including Carruthers, all of them, every one of them uses Alan Gardner. See, the greatest translators were Alan Gardner, Raymond Faulkner. You get it? Raymond Faulkner. And then you have Wallace Budge and all of these other fly-by-nights. Now, most of the real Egyptologists, they don't use him. They don't use, what's his name? Wallace Budge, because they said that his transliterations were unpredictable. You know, they wasn't always on point. But Alan Gardner and Raymond Faulkner were the 2-point individuals. And then they got another guy by the name of James Allen. James Allen is the curator for the Metropolitan Museum of Fine Arts in 5th Avenue and 81st Street. Right. So you can go check that out. So, but be it as it may, those were the individuals. And I tell you this, in that debate, it was like Mary Lefkowitz and Guy Rogers walked into a lion's den with a steak wrapped around their neck.
Set up.
They just got ate up.
They didn't read the scouting.
Yeah, they got ate up. Okay, so I want to thank everybody for giving me this opportunity to share some information with you. All of the books that you see in front of you, $15 each. And I want y'all to, in the rest of this month in Black History, submerge yourself, engulf yourself in the history, the culture, and the tradition. And you'll find out that it's very rewarding and it's very satisfying. But as you know, do it in something you really like. That way the benefits will always be very good. So I want to thank y'all again.
You want to do one question from the Zoom?
Oh yeah,
we're gonna have one question from the floor and one question from the Zoom. One question from the floor. Anybody got a question? All once. Hold up, Zoom. Hold up, Zoom. We're gonna do one question. One question from the floor, one question from the Zoom. Question. Hold up, Zoom. Question.
The question is interpretation was from hieroglyphics in English?
Say that again?
You said that he did some translation
Mhm.
from Egyptian. Is that hieroglyphics that's on the wall?
Yes, correct.
Oh, that's what it was.
Yes.
Okay. Question from the Zoom. Question?
Brother Trust, this is Sister Keisha.
Uh-oh, my favorite lady, Sister Keisha.
Beat it up, Keisha. Hey, Keisha.
What's up, family? I love the lecture. Always learn so much and took so many notes. Thank you for coming in and educating us. But I spoke with Professor Marina Bellows early this morning and told her that you were lecturing today. And she said she would continue her best and that we all must get together to do something to honor Brother Inuni.
Oh, without a doubt, 100%. I would be remiss. The question was about the lecture and in reference to a very prominent professor, educator, renowned spiritualist, our sister Baina Bello, an activist, that's correct. Baina Bello, who happens to be at the present time in Haiti. And she's been here. She was a part of our organization, African Echoes. Her mother, bless her heart, who came and lectured for us for many years. She is by far probably the most on-hands, direct personality pertaining to spirituality and history of Haiti. That's Baina Bello. She wrote a few books, and you can see her have sessions on YouTube, as well as she has her own particular site that you can get. If you don't do anything, you get in contact with Sister Baina and some of the programs and forums that she puts on dealing with history, culture, and tradition. She is probably by far the authority, bar none. And she also mentioned that we have to get together and to give acknowledgement to the founder of my organization, African Echoes, and that's none other than Inuni Aaron, the chief priest, the individual who made it happen and made African Echoes a household name for 38 years. 38 years. And there's nothing that can be said about the commitment, the patriotism, and allegiance that an individual has for his people that can be outshined or out-paralleled in those particular contexts. So with my brother Inuni and brother Tapa and all of those individuals who were on the ground floor to make it happen, listen, in regard to all of the ancestors, all of the elders, and all of the children, we salute every one of you.
You forgot the most important part about Brother Inuni.
Oh, he's from Guyana?
Ladies and gentlemen, give Brother Trust a great big hand.